Few people are prepared to hear this, but here it is. Much of male suffering in relationships doesn't stem from rejection. It stems from illusion. The illusion that simply being good, correct, or exactly the man she describes in words is enough for everything to work out. Schopenhauer already warned, the world is not driven by ideals, but by a universal, irrational, and incessant will that operates long before morality, logic, and fine speeches. And when you ignore this, you pay the price with confusion, frustration, and loss of self. Perhaps you've already experienced this paradox. You did everything right. You listened, you supported, you were available, and yet you felt something cooling down without a clear explanation. It wasn't bad luck, it wasn't a lack of effort, it was a misreading of human nature. Biology doesn't respond to promises, it responds to energy. And while you try to be the ideal man it says it wants, you may be, without realizing it, extinguishing precisely what awakens respect and instinctive attraction. In this video, you'll understand why Schopenhauer dismantles modern fantasies about love, desire, and female choice, and how suspending anxious will can restore something rare today: inner peace, emotional clarity, and personal sovereignty. It's not about manipulating anyone. It's about stopping betraying yourself in order to be chosen. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He learns early on that words organize the world, but do not govern it. What is said belongs to culture. What is felt is born from nature, and therein lies the friction. She can clearly explain what she wants, using well-behaved phrases, while the body reacts to something else. And this is not a lie, it is internal division. Biology speaks by instinct, not by logic, and instinct does not ask permission from discourse. At this point, it is worth remembering Schopenhauer's vision, the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will, pushing desires and needs. The man who confuses speech with truth loses the map. He argues when he should read signs. He observes promises when he should feel the energy. Life, guided by desires, oscillates between the pain of desiring and the boredom of satiety. And this oscillation appears first in the body, then in words. A simple example, she says, "Let's go slowly," but leans in when he is silent and maintains a firm posture. The correct reading begins there. When he understands that words are social agreements and desire is raw nature, everything changes. She is not lying. She is divided. One part tries to be fair, kind, consistent with what she has learned. Another responds to contained strength, to mystery, to emotional stability. Schopenhauer would say that suffering is born from this friction. The will pulls, morality restrains. And the attentive man does not accuse, he observes. Instead of asking for explanations, he creates presence. Instead of proving his worth, he maintains silence. In practice, he slows down responses, maintains his own routine, doesn't rush to fill voids. He reads the environment more than the messages. Books help to refine this reading, the art of dealing with difficult people, to perceive patterns, and The Drunkard's Walk, to accept the role of chance. Liberation arises when the will is suspended by lucidity, less reactivity, more center. The ego quiets down, perception grows. There's a detail that almost no one accepts. Logic convinces the mind, not desire. Instinct responds to who you are, not to what you promise. Therefore, when it insists on aligning words with feelings, it creates unnecessary tension. Energy is lost in the effort. Schopenhauer would point to the way out, suspending the will through the conscious renunciation of excessive control, not through passivity, but through sovereignty. One stops forcing understanding and begins to sustain presence. Simple exercises help, practicing posture and breathing, box breathing, reducing explanations, keeping a purposeful schedule. Compassion here is for oneself, art, the way one lives. Without realizing it, one stops reacting to discourse and begins to lead through the inner state. And when this happens, the division between words and instincts becomes evident, preparing the ground for something even deeper that one carries within. He begins to realize that he's not conversing with just one person, but with two coexisting layers. There's the social woman, educated, conscious, trained to say what makes sense. And there's the primordial woman, silent, who responds without asking for opinions. The first speaks of gentleness, communication, and security. The second reacts with inner strength, quiet leadership, dominance without noise. It's not hypocrisy, it's psychic architecture. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will, and this will does not bow to modern ideals. Life, guided by desires and needs, creates this internal conflict, wanting to appear one way and feel another. The common mistake is trying to please the wrong layer. He debates values when he should maintain presence. He explains intentions when he should simply be. The social woman listens, the primordial woman feels, and whoever ignores this spends their life confused, thinking they did everything right, but reaped silence. The internal war happens when she tries to want what she believes is right, but her body responds to a different frequency. Schopenhauer would call this inevitable suffering, the alternation between the pain of desire and the boredom of satiety. When everything is predictable, the will becomes bored. When there is contained tension, it awakens. That's why overly available men generate comfort, not attraction. A practical example, he constantly asks if everything is all right, if he liked her, if it was enough. The social woman answers, yes. The primordial woman withdraws. On the other hand, the man who maintains his routine, trains his body, takes care of his mind, works on something that absorbs him, communicates without begging. He doesn't need to say he leads. His energy reveals it. Books like The Power of Now help to overcome future anxiety, and practices like weight training or martial arts teach real physical presence. Perceived strength is born from coherence, not discourse. When he understands this duality, he stops arguing about stated preferences and begins to respect unseen responses. True liberation arises when the will is suspended, not hers but his, which stops seeking validation. He stops trying to be the man she wants to be and begins to be who he is when the ego is silent. This conscious renunciation reduces internal noise and creates natural gravity. Compassion here is not about yielding. It's about not demanding that she resolve her own division for him. Gradually, he notices something curious. The less he tries to align words and desires, the more coherence emerges. The social woman relaxes, the primordial woman observes. And this silent observation prepares the next point, where many men stumble without realizing it, believing that giving everything is proof of worth, when in reality it can be the beginning of their disappearance. He believes, with good intentions, that the more he gives, the more value he demonstrates, but nature doesn't work that way. Limitless devotion sounds like desperation disguised as virtue. When everything is offered easily, polarity evaporates. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, incessant will, which moves through lack, not through abundance given without criteria. Life, guided by desires and needs, requires tension to remain alive. Without friction, without mystery, biological boredom arises. It doesn't want excessive security, it wants to feel something in motion. The paradox hurts. The more he gives, the more disappears. Practical examples quickly emerge, answering messages in seconds, cancelling personal commitments to be available, constantly seeking validation. All of this communicates instability. Biology doesn't read goodness, it reads energy. And anxious energy weighs heavily. When desire becomes too predictable, it loses oxygen. Schopenhauer would say that after satiety comes emptiness, and emptiness bores. Total devotion kills the inner workings of the will because it eliminates the search. It comes to know everything, to have everything, to control everything, and excessive control anesthetizes. A simple exercise helps to reverse this. Establishing clear time limits, maintaining non-negotiable hobbies, saying no without over-justifying. Reading Essentialism by Greg McKeown helps to cut excesses and preserve focus. In daily life, this means not turning every conversation into a test of love. He learns to pause, to sustain silence, to leave space for the other to move. The conscious renunciation of the impulse to please suspends the anxious will and creates inner peace. Curiously, this peace generates magnetism. The key point is understanding that attraction arises from healthy emotional tension, not from unrestricted surrender. She wants to feel there's something to conquer, not something already given. Schopenhauer would point out that man's suffering lies in confusing love with constant sacrifice. True compassion begins within, not negating oneself to be chosen. When he contains the impulse to give everything, something changes in the field. The energy condenses. He doesn't withdraw for the sake of games, but out of respect for his own sovereignty. Solitary walks, consistent physical training, reflective reading, like Schopenhauer's own The Wisdom of Life, help to recalibrate his center. Little by little, he stops begging for attention and begins to offer it judiciously. And it is at this point that a silent question arises within her, preparing the ground for something even more subtle, the language that truly governs desire, far beyond words. He learns, sometimes too late, that she doesn't hear what is said, she feels what is conveyed. Words pass through the filter of culture, energy flows directly through the body. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will, and this will recognizes coherence before arguments. When he talks too much, over-explains, tries to align expectations, something goes wrong. It's not the content, it's the state. Biology speaks by instinct, not by logic. Tests emerge to measure emotional strength. Delays, silences, minor provocations. He who reacts loses his balance. He who remains whole gains respect. A practical example. Faced with subtle criticism, he breathes, responds briefly, doesn't defend himself. Life, guided by desires and needs, reveals who is trying to fill a void. Stable energy communicates leadership without announcement. When he opens up too much, too soon, he communicates instability, not depth. Vulnerability only works when it stems from a place of strength. Schopenhauer would say that liberation arises when the will is suspended. Less impulsive exposure, more awareness of the moment. She wants a man who contains the fire, not someone who gets burned by it. In practice, this means choosing when and how to share. Therapy, personal journaling, conversations with trusted friends are suitable spaces to unload burdens. With her, he maintains a serene presence, Books like Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman help to recognize triggers and regulate responses. Breathing exercises and regular physical training teach the body to sustain tension without collapsing. Compassion here is strategic, tending to one's own flame so as not to demand that the other extinguish it. Energy precedes any sentence. It senses whether he is whole or seeking approval. Schopenhauer would point out that human suffering comes from attachment to the desire to be validated. When this desire is relinquished, something quiets down. He begins to speak less and mean more. A firm gaze, a relaxed posture, comfortable silence. Everything communicates. He doesn't try to impress. He simply is. Gradually, he realizes that fewer words generate more impact. The art of living becomes a daily practice. Waking up early, keeping promises to himself, ending conversations at their peak, not at the point of exhaustion. Anxious will dissolves, presence emerges. And it is precisely there that many make a fatal mistake. They confuse presence with total availability and exchange leadership for orbit. He believes that always being available is proof of emotional maturity, but ends up falling into a silent trap. When he becomes the constant emotional support, something shifts in the dynamic. Respect begins to slip through his fingers. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal will that does not reward effort but sustained strength. Life, guided by desires and needs, does not admire those who revolve around. It admires those who have a center. By orbiting, he loses his own gravity. He explains too much, asks too much, adjusts too much. Without realizing it, he exchanges the role of partner for that of emotional employee. It doesn't seek someone who is always there, it seeks someone who is whole. An everyday example, he abandons personal priorities to solve problems that are not his. The intention is good, the effect is corrosive. The will does not respect self-abandonment. When he begins to lead his own life, something rearranges itself. Leading is not about commanding, it's about deciding without asking for emotional permission. Schopenhauer would say that man suffers because he lives reacting to the will of others instead of suspending his own anxiety to please. To orbit is to live according to the mood of others. To lead is to maintain course even amidst turbulence. In practice, this means keeping commitments to oneself even when the temptation to please arises. Training, studying, working on personal projects creates internal grounding. Reading, Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor Frankl, helps to understand one's personal mission. Investing time in something that grows, career, business, art, generates silent admiration. It doesn't need pity, it needs admiration. Presence weighs more than effort. The final distinction is simple but hard to accept. Effort doesn't generate attraction, presence does. Schopenhauer would point out that romantic love is often an illusion of nature to maintain the species, and this illusion doesn't hold up when inner strength is lacking. When it stops orbiting, the energy changes. It doesn't distance itself out of coldness, but out of sovereignty. Compassion here means not reducing oneself to fit into someone else's world. Gradually, one realizes that explaining less creates more curiosity. The anxious will quiets down, the ego withdraws. And in this space, something more raw is revealed, a biological truth that few dare to face, but which explains why certain choices are repeated generation after generation. He needs to confront a truth that disturbs the ego, but liberates the mind. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will. And from this perspective, relationships are not guided by moral justice, but by biological function. When it is said that women exist primarily for the propagation of the species, it is not an insult, it is a cold description of nature. Life, guided by desires and needs, organizes choices before consciousness intervenes. Selection does not reward emotional effort, but energy compatible with survival and continuity. The man who expects recognition for being good suffers because the will does not operate on ethical merit. Romantic love, in this sense, is an elegant illusion of nature to guarantee reproduction. Hard to hear? Yes. Liberating? Very much so. Because it removes the weight of personal guilt and returns responsibility to self-mastery. When he understands that biology doesn't reward intention, but inner state, he stops negotiating value. Schopenhauer would say that suffering arises when man insists on fighting against the will instead of understanding it. It tests, not out of malice, but as an evolutionary filter. It tests presence, stability, emotional strength. It's not about justice. It's about symbolic survival. In practice, this appears in silent comparisons, subtle challenges, strategic distancing. The man who over-explains fails the test. He who remains calm passes. A useful exercise. Observe reactions without responding immediately. Train self-control in small daily frustrations. Readings like The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins help to understand evolutionary logic without romanticism. The conscious renunciation of the fantasy of deserving suspends the wounded will and brings clarity. By accepting this truth, he doesn't harden, he matures. Compassion arises when he realizes that no one owes attraction to anyone. Schopenhauer would point out that inner peace comes from suspending the desire to be chosen. He stops competing for attention and begins to build strength, trained body, organized mind, life with direction. Investing in health, learning something difficult, taking calculated risks, all this communicates energy without discourse. The ego suffers at first, but then falls silent. And when the ego falls silent, the reading of the game becomes clear. He realizes that each test is an invitation to grow, not to please. This shift in focus prepares something even more practical. Understanding what she really means when she says certain phrases that seem clear but hide deep layers. When she says, "I want a man who listens," he might mistakenly think he only needs to agree and absorb everything. But deep down, the request is different. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will, and this will tests firmness before granting openness. Listening here is not yielding. It is remaining unwavering while she provokes, questions, and changes her tone. Life, guided by desires and needs, creates these tests as a way to measure stability. The man who justifies himself too much fails. The one who listens, breathes, and responds calmly succeeds. A simple example. She complains about her day. He doesn't try to solve everything or blame himself. He simply listens, validates without diminishing himself, and maintains his composure. This silent presence communicates more than 1,000 rehearsed phrases. When she speaks of emotional vulnerability, many understand total exposure, but this often stifles attraction. Schopenhauer would say that suffering arises when the will overflows without form. Vulnerability that works is born from a place of contained strength. Showing depth is not about unloading anxieties, it's about revealing humanity without losing focus. In practice, he shares challenges already integrated, not open wounds. He recounts a difficulty overcome, not an ongoing chaos. Therapy, reflective writing, and reading, like Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, help process emotions outside of the relationship. Thus, when he speaks, there is density, not heaviness. The will is suspended by consciousness, and the conversation gains depth without instability. When she says, "I want an available man," or "I want security," the request is rarely for excessive comfort. Security here is a polarity, someone who feels deeply but leads their own life. Schopenhauer would point out that boredom arises when satiety is total. Absolute availability eliminates tension. The centered man is present but doesn't negate himself. He decides, proposes, leads without constantly seeking approval. A practical example, he schedules meetings clearly, keeps commitments even when the anxiety to please arises, and doesn't change values to avoid conflict. This posture creates respect before affection. And when this happens, the next question naturally arises: how to sustain this axis in the long term without falling back into the anxiety of pleasing? The answer points to something greater, linked to personal sovereignty. He discovers that the solution lies not in conforming to the desires of others, but in becoming master of himself. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will. Striving to please is merely being swept along by it. Sovereignty begins when he stops molding his own behavior in search of female approval. Life, guided by desires and needs, exacts a high price from those who live reacting. Sovereignty is choosing before being chosen. In practice, this means defining clear principles and not negotiating them for momentary affection. He organizes his routine, takes care of his body, and builds something that doesn't depend on external validation. Reading, Think and Grow Rich helps structure purpose. Daily training anchors the body. The conscious renunciation of anxiety suspends the will and restores inner peace. Staying focused on one's own mission changes everything. One stops using relationships as a source of identity and begins to share them as a consequence. Schopenhauer would say that suffering arises when a person seeks in another the end of their lack. Sovereignty dissolves this dependence. One becomes a mountain, rooted, stable, difficult to move, not mud, malleable with each step taken by others. Gravitational energy weighs more than anxious effort. Practical examples: setting quarterly goals, learning a difficult skill, investing time in something that grows even when no one is watching. Short daily meditation helps to observe impulses without following them. Gradually the ego relaxes and presence expands. Those who are centered don't beg, they invite by example. When he makes decisions without seeking emotional permission, something reorganizes itself around him. Schopenhauer would point out that true liberation arises when the will is suspended by consciousness, and this includes the desire to be desired. He ceases to make it the center and allows it to orbit something real, not through manipulation, but through coherence. Compassion here is firm, not diminishing oneself to be loved. He leads his own life, and whoever wants to walk alongside him chooses freely. This posture creates silent admiration, not fragile gratitude. And when admiration arises, the devastating paradox that runs through all the previous topics becomes clear. A tension between trying to be perfect and losing the essence that truly attracts. There's a phrase that cuts through everything like a silent blade. A man who is not master of himself is not fit to be master of anything. Schopenhauer saw the world as an expression of a universal, irrational, and incessant will. And the man dominated by impulses governs neither his own life, much less his own emotional destiny. Life, guided by desires and needs, pushes the individual to seek approval, love, and belonging as if they were salvation. But this movement reveals inner weakness. It does not seek gratitude, it seeks admiration. Gratitude is born from satisfied needs. Admiration is born from contained strength. The man who lives trying to be chosen relinquishes the helm. He who governs himself creates silent respect. In practice, this manifests when he maintains values even at the risk of losing someone. The conscious renunciation of the fear of abandonment suspends the anxious will and creates true inner peace. Biology responds to contained strength, not excessive kindness. Schopenhauer would point out that romantic love is often an elegant illusion of nature, to ensure the continuity of the species. When man understands this, he stops romanticizing rejections and begins to interpret them as energy feedback. He realizes that trying to be who she says she wants often distances him from who he is. Suffering arises from this distortion. Practical examples are clear: changing opinions to please, hiding ambitions so as not to intimidate, reducing intensity to appear confident. All this erases presence. The opposite path requires courage: to acknowledge desires, to maintain silence, to accept losses. Readings such as The Art of Prudence by Baltasar Gracian help to understand posture and timing. Compassion here is lucidity, not betraying oneself to be accepted. The devastating paradox is revealed when he realizes that the more he tries to conquer by being the perfect man, described in words, the more he loses the masculine essence that truly attracts. Schopenhauer would say that liberation arises when the will is suspended, when he stops wanting to be desired and becomes whole. Leading his own life becomes a priority. Body, mind, and purpose aligned. She chooses to follow or not, but the choice no longer defines his worth. This internal shift changes everything. The ego falls silent, presence grows, and it is precisely this state, silent, firm, non-negotiable, that provokes something profound in the other. Not as a promise of a happy ending, but as an opening to a truer path, which prepares the ground to look at all this from the beginning, through a new lens. Now the inevitable question hangs in the air. What are you going to do with all this? Continue trying to be the right man described in words, or assume the radical responsibility of being master of yourself? Schopenhauer made it clear that life, guided by desires and needs, only changes when the will ceases to be in autopilot mode. Applying this knowledge doesn't require pretty phrases. It requires decisions, deciding to maintain your boundaries, deciding to remain silent when the impulse is to explain, deciding to build inner strength before seeking external approval. It's uncomfortable at first, but liberating afterward. Observe your own life with brutal honesty. In what moments do you mold yourself so as not to lose someone? Where do you give too much expecting recognition? What would change if you put your mission, your body, your mind, and your time at the center, and not the desire to be chosen? Biology responds to contained strength, not excessive goodness, and true inner peace arises when you renounce the need to please and begin to lead yourself, not to be followed, but so as not to lose yourself. If this content made you see something that has always been there but never been named, don't ignore it. Apply it, test it, observe the effects. And if you want to continue deepening this unillusioned view of human nature, desire, and personal sovereignty, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, the conversation continues, with less fantasy, more clarity, and decisions that truly change the game.